Welcome back. Our next presenters are two good friends of mine, Jorge Orchilles and David Maynor. Jorge and David are very well known security professionals in the industry and good friends of the Red Team Village. Their talk today is titled External Threat Hunters and Red Teamers. Thank you so much, Jorge and David, for supporting Great Hat and the Red Team Village. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Gray Hat Talk on External Threat Hunters are Red Teamers. I am here with Dave Maynor, who has a lot of experience doing Red Team and is now an external threat hunter. And we've been collaborating on this for a number of months now, and we'd love to share it with you. This is the first public presentation we give of this talk. How are you doing today, Dave?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited. I can't wait to go through this.
Awesome.
So let's start with the TLDR. Yes, this talk is about actually using red team tools in tradecraft for external hunting, right? This isn't about phishing. These are real use cases for purple teaming that we feel like will be big in the future. Now, what we're presenting to you is a concept that probably most people won't have a use for today, but this is where we see it being in purple teaming going in 12 to 18 months.
Yep, and interestingly enough, this is also very purple, as you said, of where coming from the red team side, you learn these tradecraft and these methods of doing things, and you use a number of tools, and then you start leveraging them as you go into other areas like external threat hunting, which is what Dave does now. So it's been a fun collaboration. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Dave?
Well, I've been in the security industry for around 20 years or more now, I guess. I started out doing DevOps, moved into exploit development, research, to boutique penetration testing, and that kind of led me to threat hunting now, but particularly external threat hunting is what I'm doing now. I have a lot of history in this area. Most recently, I've been involved in the TrickBot takedown with Microsoft and a number of other vendors. Before that, while I was at Cisco Talos, I ran the threat intelligence group for Europe and Middle East, which means I spent a lot of time tracking advanced actors out of, state-sponsored actors, of Russian, Iranian origin.
Yep, and I saw this week, actually, on Monday, the U.S. finally indicted a number of Russian threat actors for their work in NotPetya, and I know you were heavily involved in that response.
Yeah, no, it was great to see somebody finally do something uh, actually call the people out for what was the most devastating and costly attack in computer history.
Yeah, that's phenomenal work. It's such a pleasure to be here presenting with you. And I'm Jorge Orchilles. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Scythe. Been doing offensive security for about 11 years now. 10 of those were at Citi. I originally started doing system administration work, then got into offensive security, doing vulnerability assessment, built the pen test team, then red team, and the past 2 to 3 years been doing a lot of purple teaming. So it's really up and very, very similar, always trying to be innovative and talking to others and seeing how they are using various tradecraft to make our industry better. And who better to do that than with Dave. So really an honor to be here with him. So this is our agenda. This is what we're going to talk about today. Like any talk, we're going to bring some basics if you've never heard of red teaming or external threat hunting. We don't know the audience, right? You're all virtual. So we'll give a quick intro on what those are and what we mean when we say red teaming and external threat hunting. And then we're going to kind of compare and contrast the tools and tradecraft of red team with what external threat hunters do, and how red team sets up attack infrastructure and how external threat hunters set up infrastructure. And then using command and control as well as analysis and refinement. So, and we have a demo, of course. Can't do a gray hat without a demo. So we'll show some stuff off, or actually Dave will show some stuff out. So here we go. Welcome. What is red teaming? Red teaming and the Red Team Journal, which by the way is back. Shout out to them. Definitely follow them at Red Team Journal on Twitter and redteamjournal.com. They've been around since 1997. And to me, they have one of the best definitions of red teaming, which is the practice of looking at a problem or situation from the perspective of an adversary. And really, the red team differentiates itself from penetration testing and vulnerability assessment and analysis and exploit development in that it doesn't only look at technology. It's also measuring people and process. The customer is also different. Generally, the customer in a pen test is the operations team or developers. In this case, it's the blue teams. And a lot of red team efforts are manual. There's a lot of tools that we use. You've heard of offensive security tools. I'm a co-creator along with Bryson Bohr and Adam Mash on the C2 matrix, which is, we'll talk about here, but there's 57 command and control frameworks on there right now. Of course, we always want to automate. Actually, Dave in his demo today that you will see does some automation. So it's fantastic to see. And we do this based on intelligence. We do red team engagements. Really, if you're a consultant, an external red teamer, you're generally called in once a year. Or if you're an internal red teamer, and depending on the maturity in your organization, you might be doing this continuously, like Tim Malcolmvetter, for example, in his organization and others. So that is what red teaming is. Dave, can you tell us what is external threat hunting?
Right. So a lot of people are familiar with the concept of threat hunting now, which is basically just taking a hypothesis and proactively going through your logs in internal data sources to figure out if there's an unknown attacker lurking in your network. External threat hunting is the logical extension of that, where we do kind of the same thing, but not in our network. We're looking out beyond our perimeter across the internet. So we're not just looking for things that may have already attacked us. We're looking for actors that may be interested in compromising us in the future, and using this as a proactive opportunity to learn more about their TTPs and tools, techniques, and procedures, how they operate. So when they would attack us in the future, we've already briefed our purple team on how they operate in different ways to find these attacks. The big difference, though, being you're looking out beyond your perimeter instead of just in your internal systems. I run a team that does this now, and there is no actual end to this. Like, we are constantly doing it. We hunt, we revise, we evaluate new actors. We revise maybe on a quarterly basis, but the hunt never ends for us now. And in addition to just blue, red, purple teams, our information can also be used by corporate officers for risk and compliance, and actually to drive business decisions. Right. So a lot of people will echo chamber of infos that will start off with things like, oh, you don't need to, these are new fancy things. You don't need to do this. You've got to get your basic one-on-one security down. That's completely right. This solution, or what we're talking about, won't be right for every organization. In fact, most organizations, it probably won't be right for. However, it will, for the organizations, there is a maturity fit and a capability fit. This is the next tool in your tool chest, and it will help ecosystem-wise, as large companies that do this find more information about attackers, publish that in the community in general. The information filters down to everybody. So this really will, we feel like, be a driver for ways to get more information in the future about attackers. There's no real easy way to do this if you haven't done it before. And I say a lot, this is more art than science, and that's kind of a failure on my part. But uh, a way to show that this concept is really still in its infancy and is maturing. What we really want is more science than art. We want rigor. We want calculatable metrics. We don't want gut feelings all the time. However, they're very important in this process. Uh, this is kind of hard to quantify for your organizational impact. Uh, However, the ability to forecast threat actor trends early and how they will impact your organization does pay dividends in rewards from your risk officers when it comes to things like insurance, your ROI, staffing, things like that. But the real interesting thing here is that when I started hunting bad guys, I didn't come from a mathematical model background or a traditional threat hunting background of intelligence. I came from the background of red teaming, where I would look at a network and say, if I were breaking into this, this is how I would do it. Lo and behold, other people would do that as well, the actors primarily. So my whole evolution in threat hunting has really been driven by a red team perspective, which has led me to using red team tools, techniques, and procedures to better evade bad guys' detections and better to catch them.
When we look at the needs, and here talking with Dave, for months on this, and he obviously has the red team background as well. Red teams have a number of different needs, especially when you start scaling up your teams. And I went through this when I built the red team at City, where at first we were just a couple of folks and we didn't really have much documentation. We didn't have a process. We were just kind of going and getting in and moving laterally, pivoting through infrastructure. And it wasn't until the first full zero knowledge red team engagement when we were doing deconfliction, which is the process of identifying if red team activity is real bad activity or not, that we realized that how important documentation was and logs were. So that's when we started standardizing our tool sets and standardizing our logs and making sure that we were logging everything the red team operators are doing. So as we grew to maybe four people on the red team, you had all four working on a particular item, a particular engagement. Then you were still communicating with everyone. You kind of knew what everyone was doing. But then how do you scale that? What happens when you get to 12, which was the current size of the red team when I left? You're working on multiple engagements at a time. You need logging not only in the tool set itself, but you rather have some central logging where you can see what everyone's doing at any given time. So this became really important to us as red teamers. And it also is very important to Dave and his team, because again, he started doing external threat hunting as a few people, but then you started growing as well, and you needed that consistency, especially when you're going after bad guys, because OPSEC is important in both cases, but we can debate on which one is more important, but definitely very important to be consistent as you go. So when we talk about red teaming, we cover a lot of planning, and that was also the case for external threat hunting. So I teach a 2-day red team course with SANS Security 564, and about a fourth of that class is about planning. And a lot of people don't see that. A lot of people think that red teaming is just going in and getting access to a system and moving laterally and meeting an objective. And they might think the same about external threat hunting. You just go in and, hunt for adversaries, right? But that's not the case. Planning is very important. So as we were talking about process and frameworks and, again, building this consistency up, making sure our teams were following it, we created this little table. And as we do planning for red teaming, one of the first things we have is goals and objectives, right? What is the goal of the red team engagement? Most of the time, this is around gaining business value or giving the business value. What are you trying to prove? Most of the time is what would happen if this adversary were to attack us? How far would they get? What would we detect? Are our people ready? Is there a process for response? And as you do this in external threat hunting and you plan external threat hunting, you also have goals and objectives, right? You are going after a particular threat actor, which leads us to cyber threat intelligence, which is very important for red teaming, and particularly adversary emulations, where we pick a particular adversary that is likely to attack the target organization. It has the capability, the intent, and the opportunity to attack. And then from there, the cyber threat intelligence team provides us the adversary behaviors, the TTPs, so that the red team can then create a plan, an adversary emulation plan, and execute it. Well, in external threat hunting, you also need to rely on cyber threat intelligence. In this case, it's to formulate a target list of adversaries you're going after. But again, you're not just going full out looking for any adversary, you're picking a particular target. And the next thing you start discussing in red team engagement is the scope. What are we going after based on the goals and objectives and to maintain it? And normally red teams have wide scopes, and in your external threat hunting, you also have a scope. When you start planning these out, especially if they are zero knowledge red team engagements, you have an exercise coordinator or a project manager that will manage all the different things that are going out around. You have to manage the senior managers or the sponsors of the engagement. You have to manage the cyber threat intelligence coming in, the red team, the blue team. You have to have the daily coordination calls just to make sure that everything's going well. Same with external threat hunting, especially as Dave and his team scale, they need a project manager there as well. And then we have rules of engagement. Now, we both have rules of engagement. Some are similar, some are not. In red team, you don't want to affect real business processes. So when we emulate ransomware, for instance, we're not going to destroy backups and actually ransom the company and not let them operate. And we're not going to bring down infrastructure. While it's still possible to do that in a way, it's still possible to emulate ransomware in a way that you don't do that. Those are generally the rules. In external threat hunting, you don't get into a knife fight with a threat actor. You don't break the laws, which is also true for red teaming. And never, ever forget the purpose of the exercise. And this is valid both for red team and external threat hunting. And then attack infrastructure. We spend a lot of time in red team talking and building attack infrastructure so that it's resilient, so that it's operationally secure. And of course, external threat hunting does this as well. And then when we're done with our exercise in red teaming, we do analysis and response to see how the blue team responded, if they followed their process, the people followed and did what they had to do. And then at external threat hunting, they also do analysis, but they also do refinement. So here you can see that our planning process is very similar. So we're going to dive into this a little bit more. And Dave, why don't you take us through how you formulate a target list of what adversaries you go after?
The most important thing while doing this is intellectual honesty. Everybody, I feel like most people in security have heard the, oh, well, you know, we're an APT threat, but not real. You know, we're under threat from an APT, but not really. Most APTs will, you know, they have a standing intelligence requirement, right? Things that they'll go after constantly. Like in lieu of, you know, anything else to do, they'll find these types of targets and hack them. And that, you know, if you're one of the orgs like critical infrastructure, telecom, finance, right? You know, it is a concern. A lot of people, you know, the APTs are not realistic threats. However, we're going to focus on the people that is realistic threats for, because those are also the people who will more than likely have external threat hunting teams, right? So you have to be intellectually honest. You got to say, what do I have in my organization? What is it about my organization that would satisfy intelligence requirements for a sophisticated nation state actor, right? If you're in a telco, it's pretty obvious. You have all kinds of information about people's communications, phone, internet, IP, whatnot. Critical infrastructure is the same way. If you can turn off a power grid, that is a computer network attack target for APTs. So you have to really look at your organization. You have to figure out what it is that you have these people or these threats want, right? So then you have to do enough research to figure out what sophisticated actors are looking for, right? Like so, if you look at the breakdown, for instance, of APT 28, 29, and various other nation-backed entities out of Eastern Europe, right? You can almost do a clean breakdown of saying like 29 does high value political targets, where 28 can do a variety of less or so political targets, economic targets, and what I would call effect-driven attacks, kind of like NotPetya, right? So when you understand the APTs, these sophisticated actors around the world, you'll be able to take what is special about your organization and what groups are looking for that type of specialness, blend them together. Now, it's worth noting that nation states aren't the only players in this sophisticated game, right? There's some crimeware groups that are very sophisticated, like Fin7, for instance. In addition to that, we're actually seeing the rise of cyber mercenary groups, right? Like groups that don't have a political, or who aren't aligned directly with a nation state, but sell tools, techniques, or procedures, basically murking for cash for whatever they're being paid to do. So in those two cases, the figuring out and the formulating your target list are a little different because Fin7 will have different intel requirements than APT 28, which will have different intel requirements than the cyber mercenary group. Now, you also don't want to just focus on their current capabilities, or you want to be able to look at where they're going technologically, attack-wise, and you want to be able to not just be able to respond to what they're currently doing, but be able to abstract behavior and apply it, behavior from different groups and apply it to more groups in the future, right? For instance, a new account takeover attack may become popular, and you may see that in a particular group. You take that behavior, you abstract it, and apply it to more groups, and think about how they would respond to it. This is really a long, drawn-out explanation for going. You have to be intellectually honest about your targeting.
Awesome. So, we both build attack infrastructure, and we can talk literally for days on how to build attack infrastructure. But from a high level, we generally, from the red team side, we choose and procure some external hosting service providers. We like using cloud resources for that, things like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, DigitalOcean, etc. on the red team side. So we have to acquire this. And in external threat hunting, you're also going to acquire some type of infrastructure, not necessarily in the big hosting providers, but in the hosting providers that are giving these adversaries their infrastructure. Then we generally purchase domain names. Rarely do you see organizations that just allow access to IP addresses. Then we generate domain certificates, and that's because we want TLS certificates. We want OPSEC. If we're going to do phishing, we might need to set up mail servers or procure hosted mail servers. Oops.
I got big all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Emphasis.
So we might have to set up mail servers or procure mail servers to send phishing emails. We have to set up credential theft sites for that target. If we're buying new domains, we need to create reputation for those domains. We need to categorize those domains. And then we need to set up our command and control. And we'll talk a little bit more about command and control shortly, but pretty much you set up various command and control servers and you set up redirectors. You also want to customize these C2 frameworks. You want to customize their profile, how they connect, what they're sending back and forth, etc. And lastly, one of the things that most red teams are using nowadays, and this comes really when you're scaling up, is the use of Red Elk for central logging and blue team detection. We're going to cover Red Elk shortly in a couple of slides. But as you do all this, you need to have operational security. You want to ensure that all your external systems are locked down, so only your red team or your external threat hunting team can access the administrative interfaces. You want to ensure that payloads can only come from the target environment that you're hitting. You want to ensure that web properties are not attributable back to you, especially when you're doing external threat hunting. You do not want any attribution back to you, either from the hosted infrastructure you've built, from the domains, from the certificates, from anything. And you want to ensure that you're practicing what you preach, right? We're always telling people to harden their systems, to encrypt their systems, do the same. And then from the red team side, you of course want to vet your payloads and your techniques. You want to have all the indicators of compromise to aid in the blue team's lessons learned process or analysis and response process, and also detect when the blue team is investigating you. Is there anything you want to add to OPSEC?
Oh yeah, no. So there's a real term called fourth-party collections, and basically that means why steal stuff yourself when you can steal it from somebody who's already stolen it. And that's a real thing, right? If you don't have to deal with the layered defense of a company, if you can just find password hashes, critical emails, whatnot, sitting on a red team server or a threat hunting server somewhere, like as a bad guy, I would rather steal those than go through all the effort of having to break into the company. So, the operational security is actually very important.
And as we talk about operational security and setting up command and control, we also want to talk about Red Elk. Red Elk is an elk stack originally created for red teaming. And big shout out to Mark Smee and the Outflank team and everyone that's contributed to this project. This is not our project. We use it. And of course, we work closely with Mark and their team on this and have permission to talk about it and share this because it's an amazing project. So really the goal of this is to be able to aggregate all the logs that from your red team operations. So you're going to have multiple command and control servers. You're going to have multiple redirectors. You might have a phishing site or a credential theft site, right? You want to log all of that in one place to give your red team lead one view, but also maybe the white team or the managers or whoever else needs the view into what is happening all the way down to that log level, but not actual access to do anything with it. And the second goal is that it alarms the red team when the blue team is investigating you because it also queries some external security service providers. Now, talking with Mark, he mentioned that they are releasing version 2 of Red Elk, and it's going to have some internal hunting capabilities, things like data from Blue Check, Jupyter Notebooks, Neo4j for Bloodhound data, etc. So we're very excited about Red Elk, and we're going to show you a little bit more about it. So this is what an attack infrastructure may look like. And again, this comes from Mark Smee and the Red Elk team. You see the C2 servers are up on the top right. There's multiple C2 servers. You can actually have different command and control servers. You can have a Posh C2, which is what Dave's going to talk about. You can have a Scythe server. You can have, right, there's 55 different C2s documented in the C2 matrix. And then you have redirectors. The redirectors are on the left, on the top left here. These are generally reverse proxies. You might have domain fronting using some CDN network. And this is generally where the target network is going to communicate to. They communicate to your redirectors, and that forwards traffic, if it's coming from the right network, to your C2 servers. And then within that network, those endpoints are reporting things to the SOC. Things like indicators of compromise, maybe some alerts, maybe some endpoint detection and response, or network detection and response. And that SOC is submitting and analyzing these samples to external service providers. So what you have here is Red Elk. Red Elk will ingest, it's an elk stack, so ingest logs. You ingest logs from the C2 servers, which means the C2 server needs to have the ability to log, which is very important, and also the ability to have these logs in a consistent manner that can get ingested by Elk. Same with your redirectors. You're going to be ingesting that. And then Red Elk has the ability to go out to these security service providers and see if any of your IOCs are being looked for, which would give you an indicator that the blue team is onto you. And lastly, in the bottom right, you see the red team looks through Red Elk. You can also have the white cell there having visibility. White cell is generally trusted agents in blind red team engagements, could be a manager of a team, etc. So this is kind of what your attack infrastructure will look like. Obviously, it grows quite a bit. You don't just compromise one system in the target network. You'll compromise a number of them. You might have more redirectors, more C2 servers, really depending on the engagement. So all of this leads us to command and control. And command and control is the influence an attacker has over a compromised system that they control. Generally, it comes with a communication channel that allows you to manipulate that target system. And the way that most of these work is that you set up a listener, which is your C2 server. You set it up to go through redirectors and whatnot, and then you create a payload. That payload gets executed in the target system through any way that you gain initial access, and then it heartbeats back to the C2 server. And these heartbeats are important because generally what most adversaries do and most red teams use is HTTP for communication. And HTTP is not a consistent communication. You send a GET request, you get an OK back. You send a GET request, you get an OK back. You send a POST, you get a 302 back, right? That is what you want your implants to be doing as well. So you tell your implant to call back at a particular time, every 5 minutes, every 30 minutes. And then you also want to add jitter, which avoids this pattern of every 30 minutes. On the 30-minute mark, it will then do a percentage of that. So if you say like 50% jitter to a 30-minute heartbeat, you will get a call back between 15 and 45 minutes. And the important thing about using command and control, and talking with Dave about this, is the ability of having a consistent shell. So you can create implants on various operating systems with the same C2 framework. And all of this is shown here in the C2 matrix. You see there quite a bit. This list has grown. There's 57, I think, C2s. I checked on it yesterday. I actually added another one yesterday. And you can create these agents in Windows, Linux, and Mac. And that consistent shell is going to be important for your operators because then they can follow and be consistent as well, which also means that the logs that they do are consistent. So with that, with a common command and control, you then acquire infrastructure. You want to tell us a little bit more about this, Dave?
Sure. I could do a week-long class on just different ways of acquiring infrastructure. It ranges from a PO through your company all the way down to burner cell phones and disposable credit cards, or even more shady, offshore gold will work. But there's a whole lot of different ways you can acquire the infrastructure. We don't do anything that's illegal. Right, most of what we're doing is a 1 or 2 level redirection from who we really are, just to make sure that if an attacker were to compromise a host provider or whatnot, it wouldn't have a giant red arrow right back to who we are. One of the more exciting ways to get infrastructure is actually resource sharing with intelligence partners. External threat intelligence really has a lot to do with making good partnerships with other organizations, companies, vendors in your space, and being able to work on issues collaboratively. One of the interesting use cases for what we're talking about is in a case where a company might not have the threat hunting capabilities that my team does, but are still at risk. They could set up a Docker environment, a Docker server basically in their DMZ, and allow us to deploy our red team or our C2 basically there and pretend to be a part of their infrastructure. You can do that with actually, there's no end to what you could do with it. We've pretty much used Docker, but ESX, VirtualBox, any virtualization platform would work for that, right? Mutual C2 hosts that, mutual hosts that are shared by organizations are also possible. And if people are wary and fail, we don't want to allow you in our IP space. This can be done with something as simple as a DNS record. If you think about like your recon phases in red teaming, right? People will often find DNS records that point to IP addresses that aren't in their in the company's normal environment, with the idea they may be less secure, less patched, less managed, right? And you can kind of use that to your advantage. But the point is, you have to get an infrastructure. You got to get a place to hold up and call your own in order to really be able to reach out and touch these bad guys. Obviously, you don't want to do it from your corporate environment directly. And one of the things I want to point out is your goal here should be not to make an attacker interested in you that's not already interested in you, right? You don't. Part of the reason that we're going through all these obfuscation levels and whatnot is you, if you're really tracking an actor in depth, they're going to uh, they're going to be able to figure it out pretty soon. Much like as a threat hunter, I can tell you what bad guys are doing. Bad guys using the same techniques can pretty much find out what I'm doing, right? So we don't want to tip them off. And the infrastructure acquisition really should be anonymous or obscure enough where it doesn't kind of really point right back to who you are. And you don't want to leave any crumbs laying around that if an attacker was not previously interested in you, you've made them interested in you. That would be a failure condition for these types of hunts. And now I'm going to show a demo of what we've been talking about and some of the technical resources. Uh, this this demo I'm about to show you is one of many C2 setups that I've built. One of the useful things about this technique is that you can change your C2 or your profile as much as you want to avoid being identified by an adversary. So like I said, this is built with Vagrant. This is a Posh C2 uh, demo. As you can see, basically, I built two boxes to get deployed. Both one's Ubuntu or one's Kali. Uh, they have a private network they get deployed to and are able to communicate. One is specifically a logger. It captures all the logs for everything we're doing. And the other one I call the ops box, or the box that I'm actually doing things from, right? And neither one was very hard. Neither of these are very customized, with the exception of pretty much everywhere I can. I have security tools set up to capture my own actions, not just what an adversary does. For instance, my Suricata setup. Uh, Now, this is important because one of the reasons that I'm doing this, or this is a good technique, is to capture as much data as possible about what you're doing. Uh, so you can have a log of all your external hunt activities, but also you're able to collect and analyze your technique, revise it, get better at it. So, like I said, I'm using Vagrant, uh, and we can use a number of different cloud providers the cloud providers at this point aren't really that important. They're disposable or throwaway infrastructure. So when I say acquire infrastructure, I mean, well, we're legally acquiring it, whereas an adversary would not be. But these are all legally acquired, and all the logs from Suricata and whatnot in this demo are being copied back to my logger box, where it's running Elasticsearch via FileBeat. All right, so why am I using Posh C2? All right, so this is an example. These are three implants that I have in three different boxes around the world that I can at any point I want connect to, issue commands to download files, ping, uh, retrieve statistics or whatnot from a botnet as if I was one of the victims masquerading. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this is that botnet operators are getting smarter about banning IP addresses and whatnot that they're not familiar with or that they're not expecting connections from. This is an attempt to stop researchers uh, like like us. So this is a way to get around most of that. So like I said, here's three different implants I have around the world. Uh, Most of this I can issue commands almost as if I was just at uh, a normal command line. Uh, and with the POS C2 implant, there's lots of different options I can use for these. In addition to just the built-in functionality, you can load a script that gives additional threat hunting capabilities. So this enforces OPSEC, and it's very easy to move around and do. In fact, if you take a look at what is required, this blob is really all that I need uh, to move between machines. So we'll acquire infrastructure, we'll let them sit, soak in, whatnot, and when we want to use them, all I really have to do is log in and drop this blob, and upon execution, it will just show up in my implant list. Pretty easy. So in addition to just the ease of use and bypassing access restrictions, this is a great way for new researchers to have guardrails for what they can do and also record everything that they're doing. And I keep talking about recording everything, and that's very important because this is an example of the Elasticsearch instance I have running uh, in this environment. Uh, Now, the Elasticsearch instances the data is not stored on any of the C2s. It's tunneled back to an internal box it's stored on, but it gives us the ability to go through different different data and see not only what we were able to retrieve from uh, a botnet, but also what things we were actually leaving behind. So uh, Kibana now has some nice sim like capabilities. So basically, this is an evening of hunting that I use with both Suricata and Zeek. We're logging to the instance. And when you think that you know everything that your box is doing, it's good to take a second and see what data is being left behind because the adversaries that you're hunting can often hunt you in the same way that you would find them. And a lot of how I would find bad guys are passive DNS. And this is a good example of uh, insight into what I'm leaking. And I want to wrap this up just by showing there's a lot of different ways to use this data. But one of the things I find most useful is being able to correlate this to web server logs and whatnot from the C2. So where are the web server logs? So for instance, all the data I'm collecting, this is what the C2 communications look like URL wise. So as you can see, not a very easy pattern for a bad guy to figure out. But all of these are getting all the URLs that I'm hitting, every keystroke I type, every DNS request I make, every packet I send out is getting logged to Elasticsearch for later analysis. Servers, all the keystrokes and whatnot, is you really do want to be able to look at and refine your own process. Snipers have a term for this. It's called DOPE, or data on previous engagements. If you're not collecting the data, how do you know what you're going to get better at? And part of this infrastructure setup, the logging and whatnot, is all about seeing what was done in a consistent manner and being able to revise and get better at it.
Awesome. And with that, I think we are out of time. There's the references of various things we went through. And thank you all for coming. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Dave, for letting me collaborate with you on this. It's been a lot of fun. And we hope you all enjoyed. And I guess we'll be taking questions on Discord.